Good morning, everyone. This is Ula Brenda's daughter, and we are back with Saga Saturday. I will let, as Bersi has on his little marquee thing, I will let you guys introduce yourselves, and then we will jump on in.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm Bersi Edvardason, Baron Bersi Edvardason, and I like Old Norse stuff.
And I'm Kinehild. I also like Old Norse stuff. I like spooky stuff. So this is a real treat of a story to get into. And it was the first time I've ever read it. So it was a real surprise and like the best kind of surprise. So Ula, I'll let you introduce yourself. And then you were going to do the sort of general recap.
Yeah, so the general recap. Erbyggja Saga is a multi-generational saga going through the region of Braidford, which I always butcher. And there's 4 different families that are a span of about 150 years. There is all kinds of things in this saga. We're going to focus on the dead, but there is so much going on in here. There's feuding families, there's illicit love affairs, foul sorcery, haunted farmsteads, trouble with berserkers, and then, of course, the malicious dead rising from their graves to plague the living. There's always something happening. So I read this a long time ago and then kind of brushed up on it. I had forgotten all of the bits and pieces. It is I was thinking, it's like a 20, 30 page. No, it's like a 70 pager. Way longer than I remembered it being, but oh my God, so worth it. So much going on here. So we're going to focus on the ghostly undead parts of it. So much more. But the first ghostly one is Thorolf Flamefoot. So who, Kinehild, you want to do the background on good old Thorolf there?
Sure. So the first ghost to appear is Thorolf Flamefoot, and this actually appears sort of in the midway point of the story. So the first half of the story, no ghosts. There's some berserkers, which are weird, but no ghosts. And then midway through the story, we have this guy, Thorolf Flamefoot, or Thorolf Twistfoot, who appears on the scene, and he's not terribly well liked by anybody. He and his son, Arnkel the priest, kind of fall out with each other after this witch, Katla, curses them, though frankly it's kind of a short trip since Thorolf up to this point is just a giant asshole, and that doesn't change. So Thorolf squabbles with everybody. He tries to get another priest, Snorri the priest, to kill his son, Thorolf's son. So he tries to get Snorri to kill Arnkel. Snorri kind of doesn't, but then he's like, well, hey, we made this agreement. So he starts going to the forest that Thorolf thinks he owns, and using the wood, which if you've ever seen pictures of Iceland, it's not a terribly wooded place today. And by this point, it's kind of getting deforested pretty quickly because there's, you need wood to build ships and you're on an island.
If I can break in for just a second,
yeah.
There's a joke about getting lost in an Icelandic forest. What to do if you get lost? Just stand up.
Right.
Everything's only at chest height. All bushes.
Yep.
So that's too true. And what's funny is they have since about the year, I don't know, since the 90s, they've been trying to reforest the island, but they're going about it in such a Scandinavian way. So you look, and there's on the side of mountains, there's these perfectly square patches of trees in like perfect rows.
Of course there are.
Very organized. And they're just there because the farmers get paid a certain amount by the government to plant trees. So the farmers are like, excellent, we must plant, 1 acre of trees. There is our acre of trees. Check.
Right. And where's my money from the government?
It's great. So anyway, so Snorri starts using this wood. This pisses off Thorolf. Again, short trip. And so Thorolf goes to Arnkel, who he tried to have Snorri kill, and is like, hey, Arnkel, son of mine, wouldn't it be great if we stopped fighting and we ganged up on Snorri instead? And Arnkel's just like, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if we stopped fighting, but my guy, no, I don't want to pick a fight. Snorri's the most powerful man in the province.
Right.
No. So this annoys Thorolf. who goes home in a rage, and then, so this is a quote from the Penguin translation. With that they parted. Thorolf went back home in a rage, for he could see how difficult it was going to be for him to get what he wanted. It was evening when he reached home, and he sat down in the high seat without uttering a word to anybody. He ate nothing all evening and stayed in his seat as the rest of the household went to bed. In the morning, when they got up, Thorolf was still sitting there, dead. So Thorolf just gets himself so mad, he sits down and dies.
And dies without eating dinner.
Without eating dinner, right? Like, mood, okay. But so this seems like it'll be fine, right? Like, problem causer, dead. Only dead here is a real temporary kind of situation. So promptly, Arnkel is informed of his father's death, comes to the house. Thorolf is like rigid in his chair and very heavy and hard to move. And what's interesting to me is when they pull him finally out of the house to go bury him, they don't take him through the door. They knock down part of the wall and pull him out that way. And I'm curious if that's a ritual thing, like you can't bring the dead through the door.
Yeah.
If that's a failure of ritual thing, because like the door is this very clear liminal bar. Right, like, and it has a certain ritual aspect in a lot of Norse mythology. So because he doesn't pass out of the door, maybe he doesn't really properly leave the house and it's not closed to him.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me a little bit, as I was saying right before we went online, like of this episode in which a man asks to another unfriendly man dies and gets asked to be buried underneath the doorway, upright and facing into his home so that he can watch over it while he's gone, and promptly just starts to haunt the crap out of the place. This door, this liminal space, the entrance, it's most halls only had one entryway, you just had the one in and out, and so it is really the marker between outside and in.
Yeah. So they knock down the wall. They take him out through the wall. They can barely get him to like lay down. He's just so set in this chair. And he tells when they're getting him out the door that Thorolf is very clear. You can't pass in front of not Thorolf. Thorolf is dead. Arnkel is very clear that you can't pass in front of Thorolf before they close his eyes. So he's dead. His eyes are open, and this is like very clearly. It would be very bad to pass in front of him. And they don't really clarify whether anybody does or doesn't, but they do wrap some cloths around his head. And so that kind of cures that. So they take him out, they bury him, in a mound. Cool. But like immediately upon burial, Thorolf is up and haunting the shit out of everything and everyone. Oxen are ridden to death.
It's the oxen. I love that it begins with the oxen that hauled his body from the home to the gravesite. Well, that's the first to go.
Yeah, like they run off and they just like run themselves to death. The whole house is getting rattled and things sound like it's on the roof. His widow is driven crazy and she dies of sort of madness. You can't go out at night. Like there's all these things are going wrong. And so eventually everybody's just like, fuck it, we out. And so Vom, I can't pronounce that right. How do you say that? Vom. So Vom is abandoned, and Arnkel's like, people go to Arnkel and start like living near his homestead, and his presence kind of puts a damper on things. But not, say that again?
He is a priest.
Right, he's a priest and he's the son. So there's some situational power, right, in this moment. So he Arnkel's like, look, this is clearly just like, you can't all come live with me. So I've been in some of those farmhouses in Iceland, the farmhouse at Stone, which is a reconstruction. And I live in the subarctic, and I can tell you, if you told me I had to live in there with more than like 15 people, things could get hairy quick. So he's like, look, you guys cannot all move in with me, so I got to go deal with Dad. So he goes out, he digs up the mound, and he drags some other people along. And they find him uncorrupted, which I thought, but also disgustingly ugly. So that was a little bit of a weird contradiction to me, but something I thought was really interesting is by the time these stories are being written, Christianity has arrived and is well and truly ensconced in Iceland. And there's an early Christian idea about incorruptibility, So saints who are particularly holy are incorruptible. So they'll find their bodies later, and their bodies are unchanged from life. And it's a distinct sort of way to identify people who are truly holy, is that their bodies don't decay. But here you have somebody who's clearly not truly holy, whose body has not decayed. It's turned ugly, and later it shows up and it's like blue, which is weird. But it's described as uncorrupted. So I thought that was kind of an interesting contradiction, and I'm curious if there was maybe the idea of incorruptibility hadn't really reached Iceland at this point, and it's an older holdover, or maybe because you live in an Arctic environment where sometimes the bodies get left out in the ice and they freeze and you get like an ice mummy, and they were just like, this is bad.
To me, it kind of sounds like there's the ugliness, even though it's not decayed at all, points to me like oftentimes ugliness is just sort of a hint towards like monstrosity, both inside and out, right? Like this is a horrible person who's doing horrible things, and so they are physically very monstrous. And then the lack of decay is something that's very unnatural, right? Like that also points to this, like there's just something super wrong here. Like the body should have been decaying. It shouldn't be ugly like this. But here it is, ready to go out and be horrible and totally still intact.
And we're going to talk about order and right order and loss of order later. And it's kind of, maybe it's, I like what you're saying. Like it's kind of a moment of loss of order.
Yeah.
Like the order is that bodies decay, and he has disrupted this right order of the world by not decaying. Like he's still got gross, but he's
not decayed like he should have been. Yeah.
Right. Egil Skallagrimsson was also ugly and gross and monstrous, but he wasn't like, like that was part of his personality, not
his poetry like made up for it, like
right.
So they also build a wall over his tomb, and the author kind of, or the saga mentions like this wall, you could see where it went over the tomb. And that was something I thought was kind of interesting. Like if you think about, again, going back to the idea of doors as this opening, and a wall is, in some ways, a wall is like the opposite of a door. Like you can't pass through a wall. So maybe this is like a sort of final, like you can't, like it creates a barrier. Doesn't work super well, but they try.
Right.
So they go out, they move the body farther away and bury him again. And I think if I remember right, they move him to like a place that's sort of previously thought of as holy. Am I remembering that right? Helgafell?
Yeah. They picked one Helgafell, and that just means holy mountain.
Yeah. So they take him to this sort of sacred place presumably on the theory that if they put him somewhere holy, like the holy power will keep him from causing problems. And it kind of works until Arnkel dies. So Arnkel's life is sort of the seal on this all. Once Arnkel passes away, things go wrong again. And this is kind of jumping us around in the story a little bit, but I guess it kind of makes sense to do it now instead of like bouncing back, because this is actually towards the end of the story, towards the end of the saga. After any number of other events have occurred, all of a sudden Thorolf's back. It's like, surprise! And so he starts, after Arnkel's death, he starts causing problems again. He chases men off of more farms. So he's basically chasing men out of, this is all taking place on the Snaefellsnes Peninsula, which is, so you've got the big western peninsula up here of Iceland, and underneath it, I guess I should do this when my hands are on the screen. Underneath it is this sort of smaller peninsula, and that's the peninsula this is all taking place on, which is just north of where Egil's family was stomping around. So they're out on this peninsula. He's chasing people off of farms, and after a few farms, farmers go to Thorolf, a new Thorolf, different Thorolf.
Yeah, there's a lot of Thorolfs.
No, he does. Okay, it's not Thorolf.
Is it a Thorod?
Thorod. There is, like, every character in this story's name starts with Thor, or a TH.
Yeah.
It is not helpful.
It happens all the time in Icelandic sagas.
Yep.
It just as a quick aside, is part of the reason why with name studies we think possibly Thor might have been much more celebrated in Iceland than anywhere else in Scandinavia. Lots of other places have, Freyr or Odin, like Odin's the island, right? Like lots of Odin and Freyr, but Thor keeps coming back.
Iceland. Icelanders love Thor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if I was also stuck on an island in the North Pacific, I would be like, look, Thunder God, Stormer, dude who causes shipwrecks, could we be buddies?
Yeah, we'll support you and you support me. We get a two-way street here. Yeah, absolutely.
So Thorolf causes problems. This new farmer, Thorod, who is the brother-in-law of Snorri. No.
Brother-in-law of
somebody else. Anyway, Thorod. We'll just call him Thorod. He gets asked to deal with this. It's now his problem. So he hauls the corpse out and then takes it off and burns it. So we've definitely destroyed the corpse, presumably, at least according to the Winchesters, that should cure this ghost problem. It doesn't really, because there's this cow. And so the cow goes and licks the ashes of the burned Thorolf's body and gets pregnant. Because why not? And has this calf, Glasir, and this calf is beautiful. It looks great. It's growing, and Thorod's like, heck yeah! Like, this is going to be a good bull. It's going to be like, this is the kind of I'm a cattle farmer. This is the kind of thing a cattle farmer wants in his life. And his mother or foster mother, who doesn't get a name, which really kind of upsets me. Like, she deserves a good name, but she never gets named. She's like, Thorod, you got to kill this calf.
Yeah, bad plan.
I can tell you, I have this site, and I can tell you this calf is going to cause us problems. And he's just like, no, it's cool, lady. And so he's like, well, I'll definitely kill. So it had been in the farmhouse with them, which is what you did over the winters. You brought your animals inside. So he takes the animal outside, and he's like, I killed it. No worries. He doesn't kill it. Of course he doesn't. This woman's blind. So he's like, I've been tricksy. And then this calf gets bigger and bigger, and the foster mother, who has not been tricked, is just like, you got to kill it. You got to kill it. He's like, I'll kill it when it gets fat enough to eat. And she's like, it'll be too late, buddy. And, you know, promptly upon that proclamation, the calf goes a little crazy and kills Thorod and then runs away. Yeah, he gores Thorod. Yeah. Like throws him up into the air and then just like gets him with a horn. It's fairly impressive. And then runs away as the Thorod's farmhands are chasing him down to kill him, and just runs into the swamp and disappears forever. And just like sinks into this mire. And that's the end of Thorolf and his many returns. The story makes it very clear that Thorolf is possessing this calf. So
right. Yeah.
So that's haunting number 1.
It's a pretty impressive
1 and 3 and 5 and like
yeah.
Just so many.
So many. I one of the things I like about that one is that there's several times it's mentioned that the basically anything that touches his grave mound, either of the times that he's buried, everything dies. Like birds that land on that grave, they just die. Shepherds just die, just with broken, burnt and broken bones. Just don't go there. Don't ever freaking go there.
Yeah.
So
bad plan.
This brings us to kind of 2 things that we've been talking about over the week, and talking about sort of in our pre-show, like, hey guys, did you read what I read? And one of them is sort of this, my crazy theory, which is Icelandic volcano gas. Iceland occasionally throws up bits of volcano gas and just like kills chunks of the population. And I personally, like, there's one volcano on Snaffleness. If you build a grave mound, sort of you dig into the earth in volcanic areas, are you going to disturb anything? I don't know. But like birds falling out of the sky, and another story that we'll get to in a little bit, that seems pretty like dangerous, bad air stuff to me. So
right.
There's that, but there's also order. And this is my other big bugaboo in this whole saga, which the 2 of these guys and now our audience at home are going to get to listen to me have a little moment about. So in medieval thought, order is very, very important. And this isn't just true of Christian medieval thought, where the order of heaven needs to be reflected by the order on earth, but also in early medieval Germanic thought. So we often think of the early medieval Germanic peoples as like raiders and these great warriors, but what they really were was a bunch of law nerds, like every single one of them.
Yes.
The oldest written law codes in Europe that aren't Roman are Germanic law codes. We have the Burgundian law codes, we have lots of Anglo-Saxon law codes, and through this story, which is frankly one part supernatural drama, one part war drama, one part legal drama, like there are law cases aplenty, and we'll get to we'll get to my favorite example of that in a little bit. But it's all about maintaining societal order. And so Thorod causes all these problems, or Thorolf causes all these problems because he disrupts order, and he sort of punishes everybody else, but presumably is a little bit punished himself by sort of being tormented as a walking dead, because he breaks order by, you know, trying to get his son killed, by frankly arguing between father and son, which is a little bit Katla's fault. Like she curses Arnkel, and she's like, "You'll have more problems with your father than my son ever had with me." And then she gets and then he fails to be right ordered by sort of not staying in his lane as a dead guy. Like he's supposed to be dead and dead.
Right.
And in a little bit they restore order by like finally taking him farther and farther away and setting him on fire, but he keeps coming back as a guy, as a whatever. So that's...
Yeah, and that is, I'm trying to like fit in this, the order and sort of Alma Jakobsson's idea of his categories of vampires and watchmen as the two major categories for medieval Icelandic undead. And I agree for the most part with his sort of like ideas behind the categorization, but I'm not sure that those two actually fully encompass everything that can be here. And this is one of those examples that like kind of spreads out from his ideas, because he has this idea that there are vampires and watchmen, and don't think of vampires exactly as like Dracula and all of that, but sort of in the sense of it is a corporeal being. All of the ghosts that we're going to run into they can't walk through walls, although they do sometimes travel through the ground, but they are like physical beings who can be touched and move things in physical space. Yeah.
Oh, so I was gonna say, this is the whole idea of sort of Icelandic ghosts, right? Or is such a twist from what the rest of the medieval European world considered ghosts. So Saint Augustine, who did a very bad job translating the Bible, tried, A for effort, had this very firm theory that ghosts were non-corporeal, and wrote actually quite a lot about like the dead can't return to the world in physical body. Gregory the Great, or I actually can't remember if he's earlier or later, but anyway, Gregory the Great held sort of the opposite view, saying that the dead can come back solid, but only under very specific cases. And this particular argument came out of a big fight he got into with a guy from a guy from Byzantium about Jesus. Basically, did Jesus come back palpable or impalpable? Yeah. And Gregory the Great was like, he came back solid, and fought with this guy until the guy died. And finally on his deathbed was like, look, I give up, dude. It's yours. Whatever. But anyway, so that's palpability.
Yeah, so like all of these Icelandic undead are like physical beings that have impacts on the space around them. And they tend to take these two different like sort of purposes, one of which is the vampire, who kind of comes out to do hauntings and can actually spread sometimes death, sometimes like the haunting can spread undeadness to other people depending on the story. So very kind of zombie, but you can see why vampire is being used here. And then watchmen, which are much more like, and I found the guy's name, Hrop, from, I think it was Lifestyle Saga, but Hrop, who I mentioned earlier, who was buried so that he could face inside his home. I mean, he literally said, I want to watch my home while I'm dead. He is sort of, I think Thorolf here is a little bit more like a watchman in that he's haunting his farm.
Yeah.
But then by the end, he seems a lot more like a vampire because he's not on his farm.
He's all over the place.
His body's been moved. He's haunting multiple farms and he's spreading death and discord everywhere he goes. So it's a little weird. Like, he doesn't really fit into either category.
Right.
So just so you know, in my head, I renamed Jakobsen's categories. So you had, instead of Watchmen, it's the Skyrim Draugr.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do, right? They stay in their little tombs until you go and bother them. Like, they're not out wandering the world.
Right.
And then you have the Walking Dead, which are like up and chasing people down and causing mayhem.
Right.
So anyway,
let's move on because we have more we're not done yet. We've got Bersi, do you want to jump into Thorgunna and her linens?
Yes, indeed. So
Love this.
This is an episode where Thorgunna, who's a Hebridean woman, has just arrived in Iceland, and she has some really cool stuff. And it's really nice and really fancy. It includes some very special bed sheets that will come back later, these bed linens, and I believe there was a silk
coverlet.
Yes, a silk coverlet, which is very fine and fancy and expensive. And Thorgunna, I'll say it now, she's a little plain. And Thorid, who is the wife of Thorbjorn, the Stout, and as Kinehild notes, and he's not very smart. So I hope you're keeping in mind all of these Thors in place. There's Thorgunna, our Hebridean woman, Thurid, wife of Thorbjorn, and Thurid's also the half-sister of Snorri Goði, and she is very jealous of Thorgunna's fancy stuff and really wants it. But she can't get Thorgunna to give her the treasures, or she can't get her to sell them to her. And so instead invites her to come and live with their family over the winter.
Sure.
And as Kinehild said, in subarctic regions in the winter, you are sharing one room basically with the same people all winter long. So staying a winter is a good way to get to know somebody. And Thorgunna agrees with the stipulation that she's actually going to work for her keep, which is, that seems a little strange, right? Like, wait, I've been invited to go over to someone's house, but then I'm like, okay, yes, I'll do it, but you have to make me work. Like, I'm not doing it for free. And the point here is because of the gift-giving rules and regulations. And if she had gone and lived there for free and just taken the hospitality of Thurid and Thorbjorn, Thorgunna would have had to give something in return as a show of friendship.
Right.
And
she wants to keep all of her stuff.
She wants to keep her stuff. So she says, nope, I'll do it, but I have to be a worker. I'm going to work for my keep. I'm not your guest. So it's a really interesting sort of like chess move to get out of it. And then one day, while she's out drying hay, Thorgunna ignores some directions and ends up getting rained on by lots of blood. Like, it's just coming out of the sky. Like,
that doesn't seem like a good thing. Like,
no, usually blood coming from the sky is not something you want. And she smartly, unlike some people in sagas, sees the blood raining from the sky and says, this seems like a bad omen to me. I think it's an omen of death. And she was right. She falls ill, and Thor calls Thorbjorn to her, and because he is the most reasonable person around, and he's not very smart, so this is really questionable what's happening on this farm here, and tells him what she wants to have happen with her stuff and with her body when she's dead. She's like, I'm ill and raining blood, I'm dead, this is it, I'm out. So she gives different parts of her trinkets to different people, but is very specific that her nice bed linens should be burnt, or else really bad things are going to happen. That includes that silk coverlet. And she also asked to be buried at the site of Iceland's first bishopric, native bishopric. She was a holy woman. And then, before she dies, she even says, and I quote, "I wouldn't like to be responsible for all the trouble people will bring on themselves if they don't respect my wishes." That sounds like a threat to me, and it
She told him.
She told him, she did warn him, because after she dies, almost everything is carried out as she said, but her body is taken to Skalholt, and there are some ghostly, ghastly apparitions that come along the way as people, don't quite behave. And then her stuff is portioned out to who's supposed to get it. But when Thorbjorn goes to burn the sheets, Thurid is still gunning for it. Thor gunning for it. And demands the sheets for herself, and Thorbjorn concedes to his wife's demands, and things start to go rapidly very downhill.
I would say that they had gone downhill before that incident, but whatever.
So what's kind of left out of this is the closer discussion of the ghostly apparitions.
Yes.
And it was these apparitions that really made me think of the concept of order and failure of order, and was part of why, so I also read the Jakobsen article, and part of why I kind of questioned his assumptions, because he talks about the Watchmen and the vampires, but Thorgunna doesn't really do either of these. Like, her haunting kind of leads into another haunting, which is the big haunting. But she herself, like, her physical apparitions only occur when somebody fails to live according to right order. So the big one is when they get to this farmstead and the farmer's like, look, you can come in, but it's late and we're tired and we're not going to give you any kind of like nice,
no reception, no feast, no food, which is fairly like hospitality 101. You invite the stranger in your door, you feed, you clothe them.
Yeah, that's a big old slap in the face right there.
And it's this huge rainstorm, so they're arriving at this farmstead wet and cold and tired, and they get nothing that they're supposed to get. So the household goes to bed. The people carrying her off to Skalholt are like, I guess, and they go to bed. And then, like, once everybody's asleep, there's this noise from the pantry, they open the door, and Thorgunna is standing there, butt-ass naked, making food, like you do. Mm-hmm. Like, just sort of probably staring down the farmer, like,
you didn't feed me, I'm gonna do it myself.
Right? Like a normal night at my house.
Right?
So Thorgunna's just, like, she's dead, but she's back to make dinner. And so she makes the family, and the farmer and his household are just like, whoa, fuck, shit balls. Like, this is not cool. Like the description of Thorgunna in the beginning is she's very big and broad shouldered and tall and broad, and like this very very Germanic farm wife motif, right? Like, she's chucking hay. That's how, when the blood hits her,
she was drying hay.
Like, she is not a tall and slender Swedish beauty. Like, this is a woman ready to fuck shit up. She's naked in their pantry making dinner. And so the farmer and his household are like, look, clearly things went wrong. And so they roll out the hospitality that they should have. Thorgunna serves the meal and then disappears. And everybody eats the food. And typically here you would think, like, there'd be a fallout from that. Like, the dead make food, and that's not clean. But because she's correcting failure of order, it's cool. Yeah. And it works out.
And it's just so clear. I love it when like the connection between, like, this is the wrong and this is how to write it is just so obvious by what they're doing, right? Like, she's just like, you messed up. You needed to make food for them.
You were supposed, I'm going to take care of this hospitality part because you didn't do your job.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was, to me, like, the clearest demonstration of this concept of failure of order results in creepy, and correction of order cures creepy.
Something that's interesting about this is I think there could be an element of like gender at play here as well. In that oftentimes in sagas, the woman's role in sagas, women are the scorekeepers, and one of their primary goals is goading men on into doing correct action, correct and honorable action. So whether that means showing your sons their father's blood-stained cloak, which later then haunts them and spouts poetry, saying, look at your father's blood, you must avenge him, you're 12 now, you're men, go out and kill his killer, right? That sort of goading on, you have to take these actions because this is the honorable and good thing to do. And even in death, this woman says, hey, y'all messed up. Like, what are you doing? You have to be hospitable to these people. Make them dinner. Fine, I'll do it. Like, so it's interesting to me that, like, the men who I've seen so far haunting tend to just fuck shit up and be asses, and they often were asses in life. But then this woman is still doing the role of
keeping score and
keeping
people doing what they're supposed to be doing the whole time. Yeah, I actually really like that analogy. I think it totally makes sense.
And it's coming directly after we see a failure of that in Thurid.
Mm-hmm.
You see Thurid fails to fulfill this role,
right,
kicking off all sorts of badness, which we're getting to. And Thorgunna then appears and sort of demonstrates what you're supposed to do, not only to the farm and his household, but sort of to the people consuming this story, as like, well, you've got Thurid, who doesn't behave as a woman ought to, does not maintain sort of right order, and causes problems, and then you have Thorgunna, who's a bit weird, cool, but also fulfills her responsibilities.
Right. Yeah. Does what she's supposed to do. So shall we go into the big haunting? Because again, we're not done yet. So, oh my God, the big haunting. There's a lot going on here. There really is so much. So, there's a bad moon. There's like portents and like we know some bad shit's gonna happen here. A bad-tempered shepherd, bad-tempered, crazy, maybe. He's seen muttering to himself. He up and dies. It happens. Shepherds die. Thorir runs into said dead shepherd while on his way. Well, Thorir is on his way to his toilet. Again, we're back to the poop demons that we keep coming into again and again. Thorir runs into this dead shepherd, gets roughed up, and dies. And then people see them together again, seeming to be okay. But now we've got two more dead people just wandering around Farmstead. One of the farmhands falls sick and dies after 3 days. Soon people start dying, one after another, 6 of them in all. So we're racking up the body count. What are we at now? Like 20-something people dead at this point? I don't know.
Lots.
There's a lot of dead people in this saga. So Thor, and they start hearing weird noises from the dried fish storeroom. Because that's where ghosts go to haunt things, is the fish storeroom.
Just fish flopping dead.
The floppity of the fins? I don't know. So Thorin takes 5 men to go get more fish, because I'm not going into that room with the flappity flap dead fish. Like, that seems like a bad idea. All right. So then, a seal. Maybe Thorgunna. Could be. In the evening, after Thord had gone and the fire had been lit, people came into the living room and saw a seal's head coming up through the floor. What? One of the servants was the first to notice this as she came in. She grabbed a club in the doorway and hit the seal on the head. We're clubbing harp seals here.
Uh-huh.
All right, which only made it rise out of the ground a little more. Then it turned its eyes towards the canopy from Thorgunna's bed. Oh, we're back to bed linens. One of the farmhands comes up and starts hitting the seal, but it just kept coming out of the floor until its flippers were out. At this point, the man fainted. Everyone was paralyzed with horror except for young Kjartan, who rushed in with a sledgehammer and struck the seal on the head. Boom! Powerful blow. The seal only shook its head and looked around some more. Kjartan went on hammering the head and driving it down like a nail into the floor till the seal disappeared. Then he flattened out the floor above its head. Dude! How? A seal coming through the floor. And then the next day, Thorod and the crew went out fishing, and they all drowned. Oops.
I mean, it happens.
Okay.
Oh.
So, if a seal comes up, this creature from the ocean comes up through my floor, and I can't really kill it, I don't know that I would be going to the ocean the next day. I'm thinking maybe let the sea gods just have their day.
So I think at this point, Thorod and all had already left. So they're not at home anymore.
Oh,
And
that's
then
right. They had already gone
okay.
out fishing, and it was the servants and the remaining, the women folk staying at home. That's
So,
right.
I mean, but it is it's a very solid portent that bad things happen at sea.
Yeah.
Right.
So presumably the family, when they get the news, are like, well.
So the seal came up while you were out, and yeah. All right, so now everybody's dead. Funeral feast. At Thorod's funeral feast, the men appear wet like they came out of the sea. Like, again, seems kind of like a bad thing. Everyone welcomed Thorid and his men and thought this is a happy omen because in those days it was believed that drowned people had been well received by the sea goddess Ran. But they kept coming back.
Come back, sorry, I left something out of the notes. If they come back at the funeral feast,
Yeah.
a good omen.
Yeah, well, yeah, not if they, yes. You have to come back at the funeral feast. You can't just, come back.
Drowning bad.
Drowning bad, but coming back good. And they kept coming back all through Christmas. And then Thorir, who died earlier, comes back with his crew, and the two groups of dead start fighting, mud wrestling. What? But wait, there's still noise in the fish shed. More noise? The same noise? There's a fishtail that nobody can pull out of the file. And I'm kind of picturing this as I don't know, the big Arctic salmon? They're big old 50-pounder salmons. There's just a tail fin flipping about. I don't know.
And so the saga describes it as a hairy tail. So you've got this hairy fish half in. Well, then you had a seal earlier. So I guess right. to somebody who didn't know that a seal was a mammal, a
right.
seal tail is furry, looks fishy.
Be a fish tail, yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Maybe.
And then it would.
Oh wait, they don't have whale. I'm thinking whale tails. They have two little.
They have little flippity things.
Beady tails.
Yeah, they have the little bifurcated flippies. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I want to look at the Old Norse of this section. I want to see what they say.
What is
I'm these translations. I want to go look.
And I love this name. Thorir's widow, Thorgrimma Witchface, dies, and sickness comes back and kills another 6 people. So by midwinter, of the family's 37 servants, 7 of them are left. So our body count is now 50? I don't know. This might be the most dead in any saga that I can think of. It is crazy. Finally, Kjartan, the only clever man in the lot, I love that little note, goes to Snorri for help. Snorri the Gothi. He's told to complete the agreement with Thorgunna and then wait for a banishment that is next level Icelandic. Only Kinehild can describe it. Kjartan, where am I? Kjartan summonized Thorir Woodleg and Thord the cat summon. What are you trying to tell me?
Summons.
Summoned is a strange word.
This is pulling directly out of the Penguin translation.
Oh, and I haven't read the Penguin translation. I'm like, these notes aren't making any sense to me. Why don't you read that then, since those are actually your notes.
So Kjartan, right? So Kjartan comes back to the farm. First important thing, they complete the agreement with Thorgunna and burn the sheets. So
finally, burn the damn sheets.
Order restored by completing the agreement. So we had disorder because of the broken agreement. We now have sort of restored order because the agreement has been fulfilled. And then Kjartan summons Thorir Woodleg, dead, and Thord the cat, who we've just met, FYI, summons Thorod, also dead, for trespassing on the home and robbing people of life and health. So they complete legal summonses and call them to court. All the dead ones at the fire were summoned in the same way. Then the door court was held. So a literal legal court is held. With the proper procedure for ordinary law courts being observed throughout. The jury was appointed, testimony taken, and the cases were summed up and referred for judgment. So this is what I mean by like the most Icelandic banishment of ghosts of all time. How are we going to do it? Well, we're not going to do any weird shit. We're going to hold a court. There's going to be a jury, and you're going to have to come and give testimony, and there's going to be oaths sworn. I can guarantee it. They don't mention it, but that's a natural part of the court process. You know, like, we will do this. It's, if they weren't Icelandic, I'd be like, this is a very sort of Swiss or German. The trains, they will run on time every day. Kind of like, there's no trains in Iceland, but if there were, those trains would be on time.
On time, with their trees in little rows. Like, it's...
This whole door court thing, like, to me, it makes perfect sense why they hold it like this, because most of the conflicts in the sagas, in Icelandic family sagas, are feuds. It's all feuds. Everyone's getting into disagreements with each other, and a feud, well, we tend to focus in on like the exciting battle parts of it. At its core, they're all legal battles. Every single feud is a legal battle. And courts often are held at things, right? So at assembly meetings, and very dramatic scenes happen during those assembly meetings. But another way to do courts is this door court way. And this is often how you serve, like essentially serving papers against somebody, is showing up at their doorstep, knocking on the door. You've got a whole posse of armed men with you, because the thing is, if the legal battle doesn't go your way, or things don't go right and no settlement is made, you've got your armed posse to fight. You're ready to actually just like burn down the house. And so having this door court and summoning them and going through, and they name testimony, they take care to make sure that they do the court to all of the proper customs, and like Kinehild's saying, in the right order.
You have to do it all, like it's rote. We do this and then this and then this and then this. Yeah.
And even though the dead aren't here to sort of participate, having a settlement get reached at all is the end of a feud cycle. You no longer have anyone, nobody owes anybody anything else anymore, because we've had
we've like reset the bar. We've evened everything out. Everybody's happy again, and we've reset it for the next,
next time somebody steals someone's cow.
Minute.
That balancing is mentioned a lot in this saga. So they frequently touch on this notion that you have to kind of balance things out. So anytime there's a settlement in one of these, because there's a number of legal cases that appear throughout this particular story, they're like, okay, so this guy was killed unlawfully, but we're going to balance, his unlawful killing is not as bad because it took place in this instance, therefore you owe only this much settlement. It's not the full settlement for a full death. It's, it's literally like,
it's a scale.
Like the balance, the scales of justice, right? Like you have to physically balance those scales. And so in this case, the dead acknowledged. So the dead this is all happening while the ghosts have returned again to be annoying in people's entryways. And so they're back. and they all verbally acknowledge, you know what? Yep, good, cool. I've been here longer than I should have been, and acknowledge that, you know, they've been out of order by overstaying their welcome.
Right.
You know, in Alaska, we have the saying, visitors and guests, 3 days, they start to stink. So kind of that same concept, like they've overstayed their welcome, they acknowledge that, and they leave, and they never return. We never hear from them again. The law court is held. It's very ritualistic. There's also a religious ritual that happens after. They have the priests come in and sort of bless the place. And at this point, everybody's Christian, so they take everybody's confession, which one imagines would either be really funny or really dull. Like, we've been hiding out from these ghosts all week. What do you think? What sins have I committed? Well, I swore a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot of swearing. You know.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't get it up to anything exciting because did we think the ghosts?
Did you notice that there were ghosts outside our door trying to kill us? So
we just wanted to hang out for Christmas.
Well, then they just keep staying like, past Christmas. So that's kind of the end of the three ghost story. The end of Thorolf's tale, actually, he comes back after these ghosts have been banished. So he's the first ghost story and the last ghost story,
right.
But we lumped him all into one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just this whole thing. And so the word, by the way, for the ghost, for the door court is Duradormer. Duradomer. Which I just like. Yeah, you can pronounce it correctly. I'm like mangling it with my Anglo-Saxon.
Oh, it's good enough. It's close. You've just got an accent.
Very English accent. So again, we have sort of this disruption of order, and then ritual and law functioning to restore order and correct kind of the correct everything. And there's, in this last one, there's sort of this threefold correction. So to end this haunting, you have to complete the agreement that you failed to complete, which kicked off all the haunting in the first place. And then you have to have sort of the secular ritual to correct and the religious ritual to correct. And so it's kind of the three layers of society. You have the farmer, sort of the bottom guy, you have the church, and then you have the state, essentially. Not really the
law.
Yeah. The state.
Like with later medieval, we think about the three estates, right? The peasants, the church, and the knights. It's the same kind of concept. You have the peasant farmer. He's not really a peasant, but we'll call him a peasant farmer. You have the church, which that's an easy one. And then again, not really knights, but the upper echelon of society comes in.
The rich farmers,
right?
Who give counsel and tend to do mediation in law courts.
Right.
And I think it's just so funny that it took them, like, in any saga where Snorri Goði is there, Snorri the priest, he is a big name. If you haven't heard about Snorri before, and this is not Snorri Sturluson of different Snorri, not the same guy as Heimskringla and the Eddas.
Right.
He's later. We're talking about Snorri the priest, Snorri Goði, who was just a really solid mediator for so many different things. And he's a priest, so he's also tapped into the religious aspect of things. So when people are having problems, they tend to take it to Snorri, and Snorri tends to fix it, and it usually goes pretty okay. But it's wild to me how long it takes for people to be like, maybe we should just go talk to Snorri. Because he settles everything. Yeah,
I think if people could have just gotten on board with this whole let Snorri sort it out earlier, we would have a lot less dead people. So let's talk for a little bit. We're running long on it, running long on time, but we need to talk about how do we get rid of dead people. I mean, rid of the undead. One of the first things that I think of is let's just start with not having undead to begin with. So let's take them out through the window, through the door, or through a new hole instead of the door, which we touched on earlier. And that is one of the first ways to not have undead around your farmstead is just don't take them out through the door, and bury them or burn them way, way, way far away, preferably on consecrated ground. Let's just take that body, and maybe kill the oxen that you used to drag them there, because there's an issue with oxen here. But now if you've got an undead infestation, which this Whore Valley had a horrible undead infestation, how do we get rid of the undead?
So the door court.
The door court.
For the
serve summons on an undead? Like, who's the process server on that?
In the comments, Dominique mentioned Dominique. I've just like completely blanked on your SCA name. I'm sorry. Kalita, thank you. Kalita mentioned, she's like, I would feel bad for anybody who has to serve the ghost with summons. Yeah. Right. I don't know how you do. I don't actually, aside from these door courts, I don't know how process serving really worked in medieval Iceland. I imagine backup was a big part of it.
Yeah, I have a feeling this just sort of involves, I haven't looked too closely into the law codes, and oftentimes, unfortunately, in sagas, they tend to just do that old shorthand of as per custom, and you're like, tell me the custom.
I want the custom.
Tell me what the custom is. They probably just yelled. They probably just had some words that they needed to say, and the summons was just, Orlov, you need to come here. You're dead and you're haunting us.
All right.
You're summoning court.
Just bring him to court. And how do we know that they're? I mean, I guess they're representing themselves. We know that they're there because they're ghosts and they're haunting and stinking up the place. But
so there's another option which doesn't actually appear in this saga, but there's sort of things related to it do appear in the saga, and that's well, Bersi, do you want to explain the butt stuff?
Yes. So it starts with the head stuff, actually. So there's several different, there's many times where people end up like, okay, let's take care of this undead person. They're haunting us. You exhume the body and you chop off their head. That's like a pretty baseline, like, hey,
101.
And they don't, like, as far as I can sort of tell with like the thought behind this is I think it's a pretty logical thought. Like, the bodies are corporeal. They are actually coming back and doing things physically. So cutting off somebody's head in life stops them pretty good. Cutting off someone's head in death might also stop them pretty good. So
that seems reasonable.
And so we've got different things. I'm looking at Jakobsson's article right here. We've got like, this is from a saga, Prufrid af Ragnari og lagði Thatvid Fjóhonum. So the head of Ragnar, he cuts it off and then laid it by his buttocks. So this is that second step you can take. If cutting off the head is not enough for you, take their head off and then put their face down by their butt. What? Why down by their butt? What's the point of this? Haven't we already severed their head? Isn't that enough? Well, it is unclear. They don't really say precisely in so many words what it is, what the thought behind that is. But placing the head there might have something to do with the relationship between hell, Christian hell, remember we're talking about Christians here, and the buttocks, like in the tale of Thorstein Skelts, which we talked about earlier in a previous episode. As Jakobsson says, the rear end, this is a quote, the rear end is often considered to be the demonic other face of humanoids. So maybe there's a way to unite both faces.
I'm just picturing, are we all picturing the same thing?
Like, it's Hieronymus Bosch, right? Like, think of those Bosch paintings, and it's hellish, and there's butts everywhere.
And someone's nose is up a butt. Like,
yeah, you just gotta, cheek to cheek, right? It's
that is turning a whole nother cheek there.
It's not just buttocks, right? It's sort of everything associated with that. So there's actually a point in the saga that we didn't really talk about because it's I mean, we've been going for a little over an hour here, so it's, you know, we had plenty of material, but where there's this whole field. So in the beginning, this one field is like, we're going to make this sacred to Thor. This is where we're going to hold our assemblies. You cannot spill blood and rage. You can't kill animals here. And you cannot defecate here. And there's this other field nearby. That's where you have to go defecate.
Yeah.
You cannot defile this holy space with poop.
It's actually
There's a whole field called the poop field.
It's actually a small island.
It's a rock.
And they call it Dritsker, literally just shit island.
Shit island, poop island, poop rock. Yeah.
But you everyone needs to go over there. So but this whole notion about like blood and feces and sort of defilement of sacred space, and you know, where do feces come from? They come from the bum. So like all that together is this really sort of weird undercurrent in a number of these sagas about like butts and associated stuff.
Yes.
So bad, which in a society that didn't understand how cholera worked.
Right. And it is. And when you're living, as we have mentioned many times, you've got, 10, 20 people in a farmhouse over the winter with your animals, and everybody's pooping in the corner. Like, this is just going to lead to bad stuff. Really is. So, is it noxious fumes? Is it cholera? Is it...
Yeah,
Right. Like, this is some bad news. And then once it starts, you're just going.
Right.
Literally. Figuratively.
Yeah, you're good.
Solid Icelandic top tip for getting rid of a ghost: cut off their head, put it by the bum. Problem solved.
I'll give that a go next time I've got a seal coming up through my floor.
The seal.
I love the seal. It really is my favorite. And she's just there to fuck shit up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not familiar with this. So Kinehild, can you go in a little bit on the hiring a Ghostbuster thing? Because I got nothing here.
So this one is out of, I think this is from the Jakobsen article. He talks about it. This isn't actually something that happens in this story, but in another saga, they actually go out and hire somebody specifically to come and sort of be the Ghostbuster and handle the ghosts for them. And it doesn't actually work out as well as they think it will. So, don't count on your local Ghostbusters to get you out of a jam. But it is an option that was attempted in at least some sagas.
Huh.
I think.
Did it ever work? I don't know that it ever.
I think it only gets tried once or twice, and it doesn't. Really.
Okay. Yeah, that was a new one to me. I had not seen that.
Yeah, isn't that they break into some burial mounds and then end up? Is that where the Ghostbusters do, and then they end up dying from the fumes? Or is that a different? That could be a different group.
Yeah.
No, I'm not even sure which article it was. So I made a note. In the future, I'm going to put a note and a site.
Yeah.
Now you're getting all technical on us. This is just supposed to be, fun, nerdy time.
Fun, nerdy time does cite its sources.
Yeah, fair enough. When you are involved with fun, nerdy time, yes, it's true. Well, we've blathered for an hour now. So, in keeping with our theme of ghosts and goblins and things that go bump in the night, next week we are going to talk about witches and curses and things that of that nature. Bersi, you want to give can you give a little snippet on what we're talking about?
So we'll focus in on a portion of Laxdæla Saga, or the saga of the people of Laxardal, wherein a family of witches, a whole group of them. Usually you see one-off witches oftentimes in, Finland. This is a whole family of Icelandic witches who have it out for our main characters on Olaf Peacock's farm. And so there's a series of various curses and bad magical things that happen to the family. And we get to see how our non-witches deal with
Deal
the
with.
curses and deal with the witches themselves and their animosity. So we'll take a look at that.
I am super excited. So I'm not, that is not a saga that I have read at all. And it's quite long. So we are going to focus on just the witchy bits. For those of us that are following along at home, we
So
will.
no love triangle stuff. Just witches.
Just witches, no love triangles. I'm good with that. There's too many love triangles in sagas. That leads to so many issues. If y'all just keep it in your pants, it is a lot easier.
I feel like this is another good like saga top tip, right? Like you want to avoid the undead,
right?
Don't get into love triangles.
Right.
Don't
just because somebody's gonna die. There's gonna be a fight. There's gonna be something. Somebody's gonna come back. It's gonna be bad.
And now 50 people are dead.
Right? And you have a fucking seal coming through your floor. That is mad about the bed sheets. I don't know, the whole thing. So we will, Bersi, I'm going to ask you to pull out which chapters it is. So we will put that up, and we'll put up a link to whatever translation we're using. So we will have that up by Monday, and we'll also render this video down and have it up on YouTube so that anybody that missed it can go back and see it. You guys have any last words before we cut everybody loose?
Last words.
Only that I loved the saga very, very much, and I think it's going to go on my rota of regular reading, because it really is. There's all these. I found so Icelandic Grapevine is a website that does news about Iceland in English, and it's sort of comedy skewed a little bit. And so they did a summary of this, and they write off a lot of the sagas kind of boring. But honestly, like you go from legal fight to fight to legal fight to fight to ghosts.
There's a lot.
And then there's like it's quite a lot happens. There are a few slow points, and I really, if folks want to read it at home, I really, really encourage the 1960 translation that was published by Penguin, and is available as like a Kindle book or a Google, like it's available as ebook.
It is way better than the earlier translation, which I tried to slog my way through again.
Yeah,
oh my god.
We all started off the week trying to read this 19th century translation, and it was real rough going. And Greta, yes, we will post which chapters of Lockstyle we're going to read. Sorry, yes. I'm looking at the chat. So those will get posted. But anyway, read the Penguin translation. Don't read the Morris translation. The Morris translation, he's like trying to pick the most obscure words possible, and you're just like,
why?
Would you not?
Just don't. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I need to go back and reread the Penguin version, because I know I missed stuff because I was trying to slog my way through it and having a crazy work week this week. So, yes, we will post those chapters, and we'll set up an event. Yep.
I was going to use the Penguin translation for the lifestyle.
I have that one. Perfect.
Which turns out I have that same edition as well, because it turns out I have 2 copies of the Sagas of the Icelanders.
I think I might as well. All right. Well, thank you all very much, and we will see you next week, and we'll talk about witches.
Yay!
Yay! Bye.